Are they intentionally sending us back to the 18th century? You are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter X. Using the QR code on the screen, you directly access the channel with all videos. This is Ronald Stein. We can see, let me open my side here. He's founder of PTS Advance and author of several books, including some of them. Uh, uh, I don't know the name. How do you call Ronald?
Well,
Nominated. Nominated.
nominated for Pulitzer Prize was Clean Energy
Perfect.
Exploitations.
Perfect. Thank you for your help. Thank you. Okay, let me remove here. And good afternoon, Ronald. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast again.
Same here, Armando.
Great
Glad to
pleasure.
be back.
Policymakers is a key phrase. Do you know? Do they know what the oil is used for? I mean, they 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 wanted to stop development deliberately, or they fear the consequence of CO2 emissions. What's the reality?
Well, they don't know that there's three fossil fuels, and they don't know there's a difference between three fossil fuels. As you know, we have coal, natural gas, and crude oil. Coal and natural gas are heavily used to generate electricity. Oil, on the other hand, is almost never used to generate electricity. In fact, oil is black, cruddy tar, unless you can make it something useful. And when it goes through a refining process, we've been able to use engineering and intellectual capabilities to develop 6,000 products that are made from the derivatives that come from oil. And today, we're a materialistic society. Crude oil is actually the foundation of that materialistic society that has more than 6,000 products, that's demanded by the 8 billion on this planet. Because, 200 years ago, before we had oil, there was 1 billion. And we went from 1 to 8 billion, not because of oil, but because of the products we get from oil. And that's the thing that our politicians and policymakers do not recognize. They just say, it's all energy, and wind and solar energy is going to replace that kind of energy. But wind and solar can only generate electricity. They can make nothing for society.
Do you believe that wind and solar are growing in some developed situations like United States, Texas, California, and taking part of the electricity making?
Short answer, no. I see more wind and solar projects being defeated. And you have to understand too, Armando, that wind and solar, when they do work, they only generate electricity occasionally when the wind's blowing and the sun is shining. But hospitals need continuous electricity. If you're in the operating room, you don't want the lights to go out.
No.
And if you have a computer, you can't deal with intermittent electricity. You need continuous electricity. And airports, everything needs continuous electricity. That's the one thing wind and solar cannot do, is provide continuous, uninterruptible electricity. Because basically, most of the time, they don't work.
But policymakers are forcing this solution. And please tell me, why do they?
Armando, I think it's a total confusion of the use of the word energy. When I get people into discussions, I really want to talk about, you want to talk about electricity or you want to talk about products? If you want to go wind and solar, well, that's only electricity. We got to maintain the product supply chain that's keeping 8 billion people alive and well today. And if you eliminate crude oil, which is the basis of all the products that are keeping people alive and well today, then you could lose a couple billion people from starvation and diseases and weather-related fatalities. Basically back to the 1800s. There's no backup plan for the supply chain of products.
And do policymakers know that bringing back the manufacturing plants and some manufacturing? Sorry, we have a problem with. No, it's okay. So do policymakers know that bringing back this manufacturing plants and fabrication and manufacturing from China and other places in the world to the United States. In the United States, we need more energy than is using nowadays, and the grid and the systems cannot support this huge increase.
Well, that's right too, because we tend to, I know here in California, I've used the term leakage. We leak manufacturing to other countries because other countries can do it cheaper, but other countries also
It's the
generate more
outsourcing you call.
outsourcing. Well, I call it leaking. Outsourcing, you know what their emissions are.
What are you
We're
doing?
basically leaking it to them, and you manufacture it.
Without
Your emissions are gonna
leaking
be
is outsourcing without control.
exactly. Yeah, it's the illegal way of outsourcing. But yeah, when you have somebody like China make it, right, it's less expensive, but they generate more emissions because they have less environmental controls. So
Yes.
by leaking manufacturing to developing countries, you end up increasing world emissions rather than decreasing. And yeah, like I say, and if the manufacturing being over there, they need the power requirements. We don't need the power requirements. And so it's, yeah. And then they use coal to generate their electricity.
Yeah, sure. And moving from China to India and other countries around this region, like Apple and other big companies are doing this movement. So they are solving this problem or making this problem worse.
Well, I think they're making the problem worse because, we have, like you said, there's 8 billion people on this planet, and more than 80% of them, and that's more than 6 billion people, they're living on less than $10 a day. All the green movement you read about is only from the wealthy countries because they can subsidize this crazy idea. And it's wealthy countries. EVs are only in the wealthy countries. EVs are not in developing countries. And, the people making less than $10 a day, they've yet to join the Industrial Revolution. And at this current rate, they may never join the Industrial Revolution.
You wrote in your article something related to critical minerals such as copper, lithium, nickel, cobalt, and rare earths. But do you believe that the electric systems like batteries and other things can be changed by research and new solutions, new metals, new minerals, or not? Will we stay with these minerals for 50 years?
Well, to build EV batteries and wind turbines, solar panels, yeah, you need a lot of lithium and cobalt and all the exotic minerals and metals. And they're only in certain countries. And it happens to be they're in developing countries. They're not in wealthy countries. And so all the mining is basically under, just like the book I wrote, Clean Energy Exploitations. It's in developing countries that have no environmental controls, no labor controls. And again, it's only for generating electricity because electricity can't manufacture tires for cars or insulation or iPhones or iPads. It can't make anything. And that's, like I say, the confusion starts with the word energy. Policymakers use the word energy. And like I say, they should be talking about one of two things. If you want electricity, you got numerous ways to do it. You got coal, natural gas, hydro, nuclear, wind, solar, et cetera, et cetera. That's electricity. None of those electricity generating systems make anything. A nuclear power plant can't make tires. Coal-fired power plant can't make tires. Wind turbines can't make tires. But then you got the supply chain of all the products that got us to where we're at. From toothpaste, insulation, you name it. There's, trying to identify something in your house, your workplace, something in the hospital that was not made from the oil derivatives from oil. And I was on an interview in New York TV station. And first question to me was, I understand you're pro-oil. I said, wait a minute. I'm not pro-oil. I'm pro-products we get from oil. We're enjoying our materialistic society today because of the products we get from oil. If there's a backup plan, I'm all for it. But wind is not a backup plan. Wind only generates electricity. Solar generates electricity.
And this is a good point because petrochemicals today is around 30% of oil consumption, world consumption. It's increasing to almost 50% in the next decades. So the participation of petrochemicals products, you mean, are
Exactly.
increasing a lot. It's being
Well,
more important than the past.
exactly. The 6 billion people I mentioned are living on less than $10 a day. They're not enjoying the iPhones and the iPads and air conditioners and heaters and, running water and, all the things we take for granted are only in the developed countries. And so if they come on board, yeah, there's going to be a huge product need to support them. And currently, because of all those products, we have, like I said, there's more than 6,000 products that have been developed over those 200 years. And today we got, 20,000 commercial aircraft moving people and products all over the world. We have 50,000 military aircraft. We got 50,000 merchant ships moving products. Those aircraft, jets, ships, they didn't exist 200 years ago. And that's where we're at right now. And, wind and solar is not going to reduce the number of aircraft. It's not going to reduce the number of merchant ships. And like I say, we basically have space programs. We got hospitals, we got communication, we have electronics. That's all supported by the product supply chain that we would like to, clone if possible. And that would be the real challenge. And we got to work on continuous use of efficiencies and conservation because we don't want to waste it. Oil is there. Almost every country has oil. But is it going to be there in 1,000 years? Probably yes. Is it going to be there in 1,000,000 years? I don't know. And so we definitely do not want to waste it. And, everything is working on efficiencies. The appliances we have today are much more efficient than they used to be in the past. Automobiles used to get 10 miles to a gallon. Now the big, powerhouses, they're still getting like 30 and 40. And if you have smaller vehicles, are getting, 50 and 60 miles to a gallon. So we got to keep working on improving the efficiency and conservation to keep it as long as we can for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. And yeah, there's like I say, there's more than 6 billion people on this earth that are almost living in the pre-1800 conditions.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really atrocious.
Before we go forward on other points of our conversation, please let me be back to the critical minerals because the United States announced that found a very big reserve of lithium. And my question is, why the United States do not apply for mining these reserves in their own country?
Well, in the United States, to build anything is tough. You've got environmental laws to adhere to. You got labor laws to adhere to, and yeah, there is lithium in the Salton Sea, and they think there's a lot of it there. And if they want to go after it, they're going to have to abide by the laws in the United States. And if they apply for the permit, then you're going to get the environmentalists who are going to be against it. And so it takes forever to build anything. And what's going to happen if they do get a permit to mine for lithium, the lithium is going to, like I say, it's going to adhere to labor laws and environmental laws. And so the cost of that lithium is going to be really, really expensive. And you can't afford expensive lithium because the EV battery is already too expensive. And so that's almost the quote economic motivation to not mine for it here. You want to mine for it somewhere where it's less expensive.
So it's more related to environmentalists, and these people are taking control of policymakers' positions. They are the policymakers, no?
Yes. They set the policies, and like I say, sometimes they basically dig their own grave because of that. Because it's going to be tough. Like I say, to mine for any exotic mineral, to mine for anything in the United States is tough.
Okay, you do not believe on CO2 emissions problems. For your understanding, it's not a problem, CO2.
I think it's the greatest thing for the earth. I mean, it's allowed the earth to green, And to me, it's the lifeblood of our society.
Uh-huh. Do you see going to the perspectives of society, because this fight will be terrible in the future. Environmentalists on one side and people bringing the truth the other side.
Right.
So, do you see some expectations of research to replace oil in the near term, or never? Or what's your thoughts about
Well, I think
this?
the research has been going on for 200 years. We've been unable to replace it so far. And, anytime someone gets a patent for something, they can clone it or duplicate it and come up with another way to make it.
Yeah.
But we have been unable to clone oil. And so, my perspective is it's the products we got from oil that got us to the 8 billion people on the planet. And now, what's the best method to keep those 8 billion people alive and well into the future? And, if there's emissions that is, causing some fatalities, that may be true, may not be true. But in any event, you have to take a look, what's the best for the 8 billion? I mean, no, there's no silver bullet answer. It's going to be a combination of everything. But if you want to take the route of you're going to get rid of oil, which is going to get rid of the products that got us to 8 billion, that could be devastating. I mean, we would lose billions of people from the wealthy countries. And that, like I say, when you start taking away the products and, living in the 18th century, life longevity was like 40 years of age. And it's, and when people travel, they very seldom travel 100 miles from where they were born.
Yeah.
And so, you start getting rid of oil, you can start thinking about, well, we're going to really get rid of hospitals because they can't exist without those products. You're going to get rid of, shipping terminals and on and on and on. So it's going to be, devastating to the wealthy countries. I differentiate between the wealthy and the developing countries because, like I say, developing countries, they're living in the pre-1800s.
Yeah, very
Their
complicated.
toilet is, a hole outside the tent that they have. And, and so no running water, no sanitation. And,
Too
yeah.
much restrictions to the normal life. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We have a frequent participant called SRB. Always asks, how SRB? How are you? Do you think that the advancement of wind and solar in the West, because of their low power density, is being used as a proxy to transfer ownership of large tracts of land?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of rejection by the locals now. There's a lot of wind projects, solar projects proposed for these open land spaces that are just being rejected because it basically destroys the view and the aesthetics, and it's only for intermittent electricity. And again, I have to reemphasize it again and again. Don't talk energy, talk electricity or talk products.
Super.
There's numerous ways to generate electricity. So before we got, coal, natural gas, hydro, nuclear, wind, solar, they can all generate electricity. None of those electrical generating systems can generate the products that's keeping the 8 billion people alive and well.
You mentioned in your article a phrase, dangerous delusion from leaders, world leaders. What do you mean as dangerous delusion?
Again, it's the delusion because they keep being focused by, wind and solar energy is going to replace oil. Well, Armando, it can't. It does different things. Wind and solar generates electricity. Oil doesn't generate electricity. Oil basically is the basis of all the products. And so it's delusional to think that can happen. We talked about, President Joe Biden. He's flying around in his 400-ton airplane, Air Force One, 100% made
using batteries
with the products, from oil, powered by aviation fuel. And delusionally, he's saying, we're going to get rid of oil.
Oh.
Armando, that's going to ground Air Force One.
Yeah, this is a good point. You mentioned President Biden, and we have elections in the end of the year in the United States, and the two candidates are very clear who will be
You're
those.
right.
Yeah, do you believe that will be difference in the policies for energy, different policies?
Well, definitely. I mean, Biden is really pro getting rid of oil. He wants to get rid of fossil fuels, and he wants everybody driving an EV. But ironically, when you talk about transportation, vehicles is just part of the transportation. If let's look at it this way: if he's successful and everybody's driving an EV because he wants to get rid of oil, well, how do you continue to support the 50,000 merchant ships and all the 50,000 military jets and commercial jets and space program, everything else that is basically supporting the 8 billion on this earth is based on oil. Yeah, everybody's driving an EV, but that's not going to happen. And the challenge right now, and I think he's beginning to recognize it, I think right now there's like 30 million EVs in the entire world, but
13,
the 30
Wow.
million, 30
Wow.
million.
Wow.
I know here in California is like 1 million. We're the state with the largest EV population in our country, but 30 million EVs in the entire world, and they have had almost no penetration on reducing gasoline usage because, as we talked about, they're second vehicles. They're not driven that much. If people want to drive somewhere, they take out the backup car, the real car, the gasoline car, and they go somewhere. But the EVs are basically a second vehicle. They're being, low mileage cars, and I think people are afraid to go into inclement weather conditions because they may not be able to charge it.
Do you believe in the debates for the elections, energy or electricity and products and oil will be a matter of discussion between the
Armando,
candidates?
I hope so. I hope so because if I was one of the TV people, asking the questions, I would ask like Joe Biden. I says, I understand you want to get rid of oil. Do you really want to get rid of all the hospitals and all the airports? Do you really want to ground Air Force One? Because, everything in the hospital, all medications is based on those oil derivatives. And, do you really want us to go back to the 18th century? And so there's got to be a discussion. And again, I understand he wants electricity, but how are you, President Biden, going to maintain that supply chain of products that allowed us to populate from 1 to 8 billion people?
But Ronald, population, people from the country, 3 million people live in this country. Do they know or have a sense of these realities? Media are not supporting this truth. What's happening exactly?
Well, Armando, I think hopefully my op-ed articles and a lot of people that follow me are also writing the same way, are changing the conversation to electricity and products. Because if we get wind and solar 100% covered throughout all the cities and everything, you haven't answered how you can maintain the product supply chain. And that's the tough part. And without that supply of products, we're back to the 1800s. 1800s, they had none of those products. They also had, no electricity. They had, no hospitals, no medical equipment, no appliances, no electronics. The telecommunication didn't exist. Communication didn't exist. The space program, heating and ventilating, militaries. All that was not in existence before 1800.
Yeah, but the point for me is media know these problems and do not explore these realities. This is something that make me
I'm not
yeah.
sure the media knows that yet. I know I do a lot of TV interviews and a lot of podcasts, and from the questions I'm getting from the media, they're not yet at that point where they're ready to talk about electricity and products. They want to talk energy. So they're still focused on the same thing that the policymakers are.
And International Energy Agency is aware of these things, and are this agency is talking realities.
But who's listening? Policymakers aren't listening. So,
Because the right place to discuss deeply this matter, no?
yeah. But like I would love to have conversations. You know, like I say, I know, President Biden wants to get rid of oil. In California, our Governor Newsom wants to get rid of oil. But how are you going to maintain the supply chain of products that it's keeping hospitals running, keeping the planes, flying? And, gosh, I don't know about you, but just in the last 30, 40 years, I've seen airports grow tremendously. The size of the jets growing tremendously. And they can't grow just by providing electricity.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing that should be on the policymaker's mind is, how do you maintain the supply chain of products that got us to where we're at and keep us here?
Yeah. Going to the conclusions, I would like to ask you a direct answer. You said intentionally sending us back to the 18th century. Are really doing this with conscience, or is by ignorance?
I think it's by ignorance because of the misunderstanding of the word energy. Like you say, they, to put it bluntly, they think wind and solar energy is going to replace crude oil energy. But wind and solar does something totally different than crude oil, and they're not willing to talk about it. I'd like to hear their answer. How do you maintain that supply chain of products without oil? I mean, take the Tesla. The Tesla, it's 100% made with oil products. The tires, the insulation, the electronics, the mining for all the materials to make the battery
That's
is
right.
from huge mining equipment that, again, it has tires and, everything is basically, it's basically a petrochemical car that happens to have a electric battery. And if you get rid of crude oil and you get rid of the product supply chain that we now have without a backup plan, you're going to get rid of wind turbines, solar panels, EVs, because all the parts are made from oil derivatives manufactured from oil.
And it is interesting because the United States has an influence in the world in these decisions, and it's a very strong position. And,
Exactly.
And so we can only pray to policymakers be changed in the next mandate to move this situation to more truth.
Well, I try in all my articles and all the books I've written to bring energy literacy to the dinner table.
Yeah.
To talk about it, because if someone's got a solution to maintain the supply chain of products, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But like I say, we've had 200 years to come up with a replacement and have been unable to do it. And wind and solar doesn't replace the supply chain of products. It's just another way of generating electricity, like a hydro dam.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this nice conversation, Ronald Stein.
Okay,
Thank you.
Armando, you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.